At 40 years old, Darnell Jackson was a man who understood the value of stability. As a warehouse supervisor in St. Louis, his salary was a steady $57,000 a year. Not a fortune, but enough to build a life on. It was honest work, managing the flow of goods and the sweat of good people, and it paid the bills. More than that, it paid for the life his wife, Kiara, wanted to project. Their combined household income was $88,000, a sum that felt substantial on paper but evaporated into a mist of lease payments, credit card bills, and the constant, unspoken pressure to appear more successful than they were. The house, a modest but sturdy brick bungalow in North County, had been his father's pride and joy. It was the one truly solid thing in his life, a foundation of paid-off mortgage and cherished memories. But at 10:41 p.m. on a Tuesday night in October, the foundation of his marriage cracked clean through. He was standing in the shadows of the hallway, just outside the bright rectangle of the kitchen doorway, a glass of water in his hand. He'd been about to step in when he heard Kiara's voice, low and conspiratorial, laced with a familiar, weary condescension. She was on the phone, her back to him, leaning against the cool granite of the $4,000 countertop she had insisted on 2 years prior. "I know, Mama. I know it's taking forever." Kiara sighed. Her fingers traced the rim of a wine glass. "But we have to be patient. It's a process." A pause. Darnell felt the ice in his glass begin to melt, a slow drip against his fingers. He knew who was on the other end of the line. Brenda, his mother-in-law, a woman whose approval was a currency Kiara was always trying to earn. No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He just goes to his little job, comes home, and thinks this is all for him. She let out a small, bitter laugh that sounded like cracking ice. It was a sound he knew well. He should have turned away. He should have made a noise, cleared his throat, let her know he was there. But he was frozen, a statue of a husband in his own home. Then came the words he had been dreading, the words his father had warned him about, the words that had been a specter in his marriage for 3 long years. "Look, you don't have to keep reminding me," Kiara said, her voice dropping even lower. "You're just temporary. We both know it. He's a means to an end." The sentence wasn't for her mother. Darnell realized with a jolt of cold clarity that she was repeating what her mother had just said to her. But it didn't matter who originated it. Kiara had said it. Again. For the second time. The glass in Darnell's hand felt impossibly heavy. The world seemed to shrink down to the sound of his own blood roaring in his ears. Twice. His father's voice echoed from a memory 5 years old, as clear as if he were standing right beside him. "Son, you're a good man, a loyal man, but loyalty can be a blindfold. I'm giving you this house free and clear, but there's a condition. For your own protection. She has to prove she sees it as a home, not just a stepping stone. If she ever tells you you're temporary, you tell her that's a mistake. If she says it twice, you call Mr. Harris." Darnell backed away from the doorway, his movements silent and deliberate. He placed the glass on the small hall table with a hand that did not tremble, though his insides were a churning sea of ice and fire. He retreated to the living room, sinking into his worn, comfortable armchair, a $300 piece he'd bought a decade ago, a stark contrast to the sleek, uncomfortable $1,200 leather sofa Kiara had picked out. The room was dark, lit only by the faint blue glow of the cable box. He stared at the blank television screen, but he wasn't seeing it. He was seeing the notarized document locked in the small, fireproof safe in his closet. A promise made to a dying father. A promise kept. And a trigger, now pulled for the second and final time. The life he had been living was over. He had no idea what was coming next, only that he would face it with the quiet finality his father had taught him. The outrage was a cold, hard stone in his gut, but his face in the dim light was a mask of pure calm. The game was over. He just had to play out the last few moves. What his wife and mother-in-law didn't know was that their long-term plan had just run into a very sudden, very permanent dead end. And he, the temporary man, was about to become the most permanent thing in their lives. Have you ever been made to feel small in your own home? Let us know in the comments how you found the strength to stand up for yourself. The story of Darnell's quiet revolution is just beginning. The facade of their domestic life had been constructed with careful precision, mostly by Kiara. It was a stage set for an audience of her friends and, most importantly, her mother. Darnell's role was simple: to be the stable, reliable background character who funded the production. He remembered the argument over the dining room table. He had found a solid oak set at a local furniture store for $450, sturdy and practical. "Darnell, no. It looks like something from your father's house," Kiara had said, her nose wrinkled in distaste. "We need something that says, 'We've arrived.'" They ended up with an $800 glass and chrome set from a trendy boutique in the Central West End, a fragile thing that collected fingerprints and wobbled if you leaned on it too hard. Darnell paid for it from his savings, a fund he'd been building for emergency home repairs. Their life was a gallery of these small, expensive concessions. Her car was a new model Nissan Altima, a $28,000 vehicle with a monthly lease payment of $380 that made Darnell wince every time it was deducted from their joint account. He, meanwhile, drove his 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, a car he maintained himself on weekends. "When are you going to get rid of that old thing?" her mother Brenda had asked once, looking at his Camry parked in the driveway as if it were a piece of trash. "It's embarrassing." Kiara had just stood there, silent, offering no defense. The house itself was a source of constant tension. It was a gift from his father, a man who had worked for 35 years at the same manufacturing plant to pay it off. It was Darnell's inheritance, his only real asset, valued at a solid $250,000. When they married, Darnell, in a gesture of love and trust, had put Kiara on the deed. His father, already ill, but with his mind as sharp as a razor, had been furious. "A man's home is his castle, son," his father had said, his voice raspy but firm. He was sitting in his favorite recliner, the one that now sat in Darnell's living room. "You don't just give away the keys to the kingdom." What has she brought to this table? A mountain of debt and a list of demands? "I love her, Dad," Darnell had replied, feeling like a foolish boy. Love is a verb. It's about what you do, how you build together. It's not about what you can get, his father countered. That's when he had called his lawyer, Mr. Harris. The document they drafted was his father's last act of protection. It was a conditional transfer of title. Darnell signed over his half of the property to his father, who then placed it in a trust. The trust's sole instruction was to revert the full title back to Darnell, and only Darnell, under one specific condition: the triggering of a clause. The clause was activated if two non-family witnesses, or Darnell himself, could attest that Kiara had, on two separate occasions, referred to him or his position in the home as temporary. The first time had been 3 years ago. They were hosting a small barbecue. Darnell was at the grill, the smoke clinging to his clothes, a cheap $15 apron tied around his waist. He was happy. Their friends were laughing, the sun was warm, and the smell of roasting chicken filled the air. Kiara and her mother were standing near the patio door, thinking they were out of earshot. He just overheard a snippet of their conversation as he went to grab more tongs. "He seems content with all this," Brenda had said, a dismissive wave of her hand indicating the pleasant, middle-class scene. "This little house, this little job." "It's fine for now, Mama," Kiara had replied, her voice smooth and placating. You have to see the big picture. This is just a starter phase. You're just temporary, we both know it. Once I finish my online certifications and get a real corporate job, we can move up. Clayton, maybe? This is all just temporary. The word had hit him like a physical blow. Temporary. He, his life, his father's home, it was all a placeholder. He confronted her later that night after everyone had left. The manufactured smiles were gone, and the exhaustion of performance had set in. I heard what you said to your mother, Kiara. She didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. She just looked annoyed. Oh, Darnell, don't be so dramatic. You know what she's like. I was just managing her. You said I was temporary. That this house was temporary. It's just talk, she'd said, waving a dismissive hand, the gesture so much like her mother's. Don't make a big deal out of nothing. He had let it go. He had swallowed the hurt and the anger because he loved her, and he wanted to believe she was just placating her overbearing mother. He wanted to believe the foundation was still strong. He had made a critical mistake. He had not understood that it wasn't just talk. It was the truth, spoken aloud. And now, 3 years later, she had said it again. The starter phase was apparently still in effect. He now understood that for Kiara, their marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a residency program, and he was just the landlord until she found a better place to live. The outrage didn't accumulate in a sudden explosion. It had been a slow, steady drip, eroding his self-worth piece by piece over 5 years. The escalating betrayal was a symphony conducted by Kiara, with her mother, Brenda, playing first violin. Brenda was a woman who measured the world in brand names and zip codes. She lived in a sleek 2-bedroom luxury apartment in Clayton, the kind of place with a doorman and floor-to-ceiling glass windows that looked out over other glass towers. Her rent was a staggering $3,200 a month, a fact she mentioned often, a subtle but constant reminder of Darnell's perceived inadequacy. Brenda's visits to their North County home were like inspections. She would run a manicured finger over a dusty bookshelf or eye the scuff marks on the hardwood floors with a barely concealed grimace. "Darnell, honey," she'd say, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "a man's home reflects his ambition. You have to think about appearances." One Saturday, Darnell was in the backyard, carefully tending to the small vegetable garden his father had started. The tomatoes were just beginning to ripen on the vine. It was his sanctuary, a place of peace. Kiara and Brenda came outside, dressed for a day of shopping. Brenda was wearing a $1,500 Burberry trench coat, even though it was a perfectly sunny day. "What are you doing out here playing in the dirt?" Brenda asked, looking at his soil-stained jeans and worn $60 work boots. "It's a garden, Brenda. These will be our tomatoes in a few weeks," Darnell said, trying to keep his tone light. "Oh, that's quaint," she said. Kiara, standing beside her, just smiled weakly. "But really, Darnell, a man with a house this size should have a professional landscaping service. It's only about $200 a month. It's an investment in your property value." "I like doing it myself," Darnell said, his jaw tightening. "Of course you do," Brenda murmured, turning to Kiara. "Come on, sweetie, we'll be late for our appointment at Neiman Marcus. I saw a handbag you'll just die for." Darnell watched them leave, Kiara glancing back at him with an apologetic shrug, as if he were the one being unreasonable. The handbag, a sleek leather tote, appeared the next day. It cost $450, charged to their joint credit card. When he questioned the expense, Kiara was ready with a defense. "It was a gift from Mama," she'd said. "She put it on our card, Kiara." "She's going to pay me back. God, you scrutinize every little thing." "It's suffocating," she'd snapped, storming out of the room. Brenda, of course, never paid her back. The humiliations were often public. At a dinner party with Kiara's friends, a circle of young professionals who talked about stock options and weekend trips to Napa, the conversation turned to careers. A man named Marcus, a financial analyst, was describing a big deal his firm had just closed. "And what about you, Darnell? What's new in your world?" Marcus asked, turning to him. Before Darnell could answer, Kiara jumped in. "Oh, Darnell keeps the world moving," she said, with a bright, false smile. "He works at a warehouse. It's very essential." The word essential was delivered with a slight sneer, as if it were a synonym for unimportant. The table went quiet for a moment. Darnell could feel the pitying looks. He just smiled politely and took a sip of his water. "It's a good job," he said quietly. "I work with good people." The rest of the evening, he was invisible. The conversation flowed around him, a river of talk about promotions, bonuses, and corporate politics he couldn't possibly understand. He was the designated driver, the silent partner, the man who owned the house they were in, but was somehow the least important person in the room. The cruelty wasn't always about money. It was about his very being. His taste in music was dated. His friends from the warehouse were rough. His idea of a nice evening, grilling in the backyard and watching a movie, was boring. "Why can't we do things?" Kiara would complain. "Go to gallery openings, try that new $200 a plate restaurant downtown. You have no ambition to experience life." "My ambition is to live a good life, Kiara, a peaceful life. Not to spend money we don't have to impress people we don't like," he once told her, his patience worn thin. "See, that's the problem right there," she had shot back. "That's your father talking. That small town, clock in, clock out mentality. I want more than that. I deserve more than that." The most cutting moments came when they discussed the future. Kiara was taking online courses for a project management certification, convinced it was her ticket out of her current $31,000 a year administrative assistant job and into a six-figure salary. Darnell supported her, paid for the $3,000 course fees without complaint, hoping it would bring her happiness, but her plans never seemed to include him. One evening, he walked into the bedroom and saw her scrolling through real estate listings on her laptop. Not in their area. She was looking at multi-million-dollar homes in Ladue. "Daydreaming?" he asked. Trying to sound playful, she slammed the laptop shut, startled. "Just looking, seeing what's out there." "Those places are in a different universe, Kai." "For you, maybe," she said coolly. "I'm planning for my future. You should try it sometime." Each comment, each dismissive gesture, each extravagant purchase on his dime was a drop of poison. He had been absorbing it for years, telling himself it was just Kiara's insecurity, her mother's influence. He thought his love and stability would be enough to anchor her, but after hearing her on the phone, he understood. He wasn't an anchor. He was ballast, meant to be jettisoned as soon as her ship was ready to sail. The accumulation of these betrayals no longer felt like 1,000 small cuts. It felt like a single, gaping wound. And he finally knew with absolute certainty that it was time to stop the bleeding. He had given her every chance to see him, to value him, to build a life with him. She had failed the test, twice. The night air of his own home had never felt so foreign. It was 10:41 p.m. The numbers on the microwave clock glowed a malevolent red. Darnell stood motionless in the hallway, the echo of Kiara's words. "You're just temporary, we both know it," reverberating in the silent space between his thoughts. The phrase wasn't an insult. It was a verdict. It was the final official confirmation of a truth he had refused to accept for years. He could hear the soft click of her wine glass as she set it on the granite countertop, the one he'd installed himself to save $800 on labor, a fact she conveniently forgot whenever she talked about the kitchen remodel. He heard the cheerful, dismissive tone she used to end the call with her mother. Okay, Mama. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Love you. Love. The word sounded hollow, a counterfeit coin dropped on a stone floor. He felt a sudden, profound coldness seep into his bones, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air outside. It was the cold of absolute certainty, the warmth of hope, of denial, of the desperate belief that love could fix this had been extinguished completely. He took a slow, deliberate step back, melting deeper into the shadows of the hallway. He could not face her. Not now. If he walked into that kitchen, she would see it on his face. The 5 years of quiet humiliation, the thousands of dollars spent to placate her, the sting of 100 condescending remarks. It would all be there in his eyes. And the quiet, methodical finality his father had taught him to value would be lost to a storm of well-earned rage, strategic restraint. That was the key. He retreated down the hall to their bedroom. The room was neat, decorated in the neutral grays and whites Kiara favored, a style she'd copied from a magazine. It felt like a hotel room. His side of the bed was simple. A small wooden nightstand holding a lamp, a glass of water, and an old paperback. Her side was cluttered with bottles of expensive lotions and serums, a silk sleep mask, and a $150 aromatherapy diffuser that puffed a cloying lavender scent into the air. He moved to the closet and knelt down. Behind a row of his neatly folded work jeans, there was a small, black fireproof safe. It was a Sentry safe, a $150 model he'd bought after his father passed. His fingers, usually so steady from years of manual work, fumbled slightly with the combination. 8/16/54, his father's birthday. The lock clicked open. Inside were the essential documents of his life. The deed to the house, before he'd foolishly added her name, his father's will, his own birth certificate, and on top of it all, a thick, yellowed envelope sealed with wax, bearing the insignia of the law firm Harris, and Sons. He lifted it out. It felt heavier than paper. It felt like a judgment. He didn't need to open it. He knew its contents by heart. He had been there when it was drafted, sitting in the stuffy, leather-scented office of Mr. Elias Harris, a man who had been his father's lawyer for 40 years. He remembered his father, frail but resolute, explaining the clause to him. This is not about punishing the girl, Darnell. This is about protecting what's yours. A foundation. You can't build a life on shifting sand. If she proves she's rock, this document will gather dust forever. If she proves she's sand, it will save you. He ran his thumb over the seal. He could hear Kiara moving around the kitchen, rinsing her wine glass, the familiar sounds of her nightly routine. Any other night, it would have been comforting. Tonight, it was the sound of a stranger in his house. The house his father had left him. The house he was about to take back. He closed the safe, the click of the lock echoing the finality that had settled in his heart. He stood up, the envelope in his hand, and walked over to his dresser. He tucked it carefully inside a drawer, beneath a stack of his favorite old T-shirts. The discovery was complete. The evidence was irrefutable. The trigger had been pulled. Now, the quiet part began. The part where he pretended everything was normal, while his world was being systematically dismantled and rebuilt, just as his father had planned. The next morning, Darnell woke up at 5:30 a.m., same as always. The space beside him in the king-sized bed was empty. Kiara had taken to sleeping late on Wednesdays, her one day to work from home. For a moment, lying in the pre-dawn gloom, the weight of the previous night pressed down on him, a physical ache in his chest, but he pushed it away, replacing it with a cold, clear sense of purpose. Today was the first day of the rest of his life, and it required a performance. He went through his morning routine with practiced normalcy. He showered, the hot water doing little to warm the ice in his veins. He dressed in his work uniform, sturdy khaki pants, a navy blue polo shirt with the company logo, and his worn $60 steel-toed boots. He looked in the mirror. The face staring back at him was tired, the deep brown skin around his eyes showing the strain. But his expression was calm, unreadable. He could do this. Downstairs, he made coffee, the aroma filling the silent kitchen. He automatically started to prepare Kiara's cup just the way she liked it, a splash of oat milk and 1 teaspoon of sugar, and then stopped, his hand hovering over the mug. He put it back on the shelf. It was a small act of rebellion, the first of many. He made only his own coffee, black and strong, and drank it standing at the counter, the same counter where she had stood and sealed her own fate just hours before. He was an actor on a stage, and every normal gesture was a lie. At 7:15 a.m., just as he was about to leave, Kiara drifted downstairs, wrapped in a $120 silk robe. Her hair was piled messily on her head, her face still soft with sleep. "Morning," she mumbled, heading for the coffee pot. "You didn't make me any?" she asked, a note of petulant surprise in her voice. "Sorry, I was running late," Darnell said, his voice even. It was the first lie. It slid out easier than he expected. She shot him a look of annoyance, but said nothing, starting the machine again. "Are you working late tonight?" she asked, her back to him. "Not sure. Depends on the shipment schedule," he replied. This was a half-truth. He would be late, but not because of work. He had an appointment to keep. "Okay, well, text me. Mama wants us to come over for dinner on Friday. She's making her famous pot roast." Her famous pot roast was notoriously dry, but it was a command performance they were not allowed to miss. "We'll see," Darnell said, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. "Have a good day." He didn't kiss her goodbye. He hadn't for months. Their affection had withered to a set of domestic routines, and even those were now falling away. As he drove his old Camry towards the highway, his phone buzzed. A text from Kiara. "Don't forget to transfer $200 for the electric bill. It's due today." He looked at the message. Normally, he would transfer it immediately from his personal account into their joint checking. His $57,000 salary was the bedrock that paid for the mortgage, which was non-existent, but she didn't need to know the house was paid off, the utilities, the insurance. Her $31,000 salary was for extras, handbags, lunches with her mother, her lease payment. He typed back a simple reply. "Will do." He did not transfer the money. This was the second lie. A lie of omission. The day at the warehouse was a blur of manifests and forklifts. He moved through his tasks with robotic efficiency, his mind miles away. His colleagues, men he'd known for years, noticed his quietness. "Everything all right, D?" asked his friend Leon, a burly man with a kind heart. "You're quiet as a church mouse today." "Just got a lot on my mind, man," Darnell said, forcing a small smile. "Woman troubles?" Leon asked, his voice gentle. "Something like that," Darnell admitted, the understatement of the century. At 4 p.m. he clocked out. Instead of heading home, he drove west, away from North County and toward Clayton. The neighborhoods changed, the modest brick homes giving way to sprawling mansions and gleaming glass towers. He pulled into the parking garage of a sleek office building, the kind Brenda would approve of. He had an appointment at 4:30 p.m. with Mr. Elias Harris. He was holding the thick, yellowed envelope from his father's safe. Playing dumb was exhausting. The weight of his silence felt heavier than any shipment he had ever managed, but every moment of feigned normalcy was a step closer to the end. Every lie was a brick in the new foundation he was building, this time for himself alone. The law offices of Harris, Harris & Sons were on the 14th floor, a world away from the dust and diesel fumes of the warehouse. The air was cool and smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. A receptionist with elegant silver braids looked up as Darnell approached. "I have a 4:30 appointment with Mr. Elias Harris. My name is Darnell Jackson." "Of course, Mr. Jackson. He's expecting you," she said, with a warm smile. Mr. Harris was waiting for him by the door of his corner office. He was a tall, distinguished black man in his late 70s, with a fringe of white hair and the same sharp, intelligent eyes Darnell remembered from 5 years ago. He wore a simple but perfectly tailored gray suit that probably cost more than Darnell's entire wardrobe. "Darnell, it's good to see you, son. Though I wish it were under better circumstances," Mr. Harris said, his voice a low, comforting baritone. He shook Darnell's hand firmly and gestured toward one of the 2 plush leather chairs facing his massive mahogany desk. The office was lined with books, not for decoration, but the well-worn kind, filled with notes and bookmarks. A window behind the desk offered a panoramic view of the city, a tapestry of steel and glass under the afternoon sun. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, sir," Darnell said, taking a seat. "Your father was more than a client, Darnell. He was a friend. I will always have time for his son." Mr. Harris sat down, his gaze patient and direct. "He told me you might call one day. I hoped you never would. You have the document?" Darnell nodded, pulling the yellowed envelope from his jacket pocket and sliding it across the vast expanse of the desk. "She said it again last night. The second time." Mr. Harris picked up the envelope but didn't open it. He seemed to weigh it in his hand. "Tell me exactly what happened." Darnell recounted the scene from the previous night, his voice low and steady. He told the lawyer about standing in the hallway, about the phone call with Brenda, and he repeated Kiara's words verbatim, "You're just temporary. We both know it." He then described the first instance, 3 years prior, at the barbecue. He left out none of the painful details, laying the facts bare on the polished surface of the desk between them. Mr. Harris listened without interruption, his expression unchanging. When Darnell finished, the lawyer was silent for a long moment, looking out the window. "Your father was a wise man," he said finally, turning back to Darnell. "He saw the potential for this. He hoped he was wrong, but he was not a man who left things to chance." He finally broke the wax seal on the envelope and pulled out the thick sheaf of papers. He read through them slowly, his eyes scanning the legal jargon. "It's all here. The original deed, your signature transferring your half-share to your father's trust, the trust instrument itself with the reversionary clause, and the notarized affidavits from the 2 witnesses who were at your father's bedside when he signed it, confirming his soundness of mind and intent." He looked up at Darnell. "This is ironclad. It's unconventional, but it's legally sound. Your father structured this as a conditional life estate for your wife, contingent on her good faith in the marital partnership, with a very specific, verbally triggered termination clause. Her share in the property was never absolute. It was always conditional." A wave of relief washed over Darnell, so potent it almost made him dizzy. "So, what happens now?" "Now we execute the clause," Mr. Harris said, his tone shifting from empathetic to professional. "I will draft a formal declaration of termination of conditional estate. It will cite the 2 instances of the verbal trigger as attested by you. We will file it along with a copy of the original trust document with the St. Louis County Recorder of Deeds. As soon as it is filed and stamped, the title to the property at 4518 Oakmont Drive reverts solely to you. The trust will dissolve, its purpose fulfilled. Your wife's name will be legally removed from the title. The house will be yours and yours alone, just as it was before you were married." "How long will it take?" Darnell asked. "The filing is instantaneous. We can do it electronically tomorrow morning, By noon tomorrow, the house will be legally yours. Then we serve her. Serve her? We will have a process server deliver a package to her. It will contain a copy of the filed declaration, a letter from me explaining the legal reality of the situation, and a formal notice to vacate the premises within 30 days, as she will no longer have any legal right of residence. Mr. Harris's face was grim but resolute. There will be no negotiation. The terms your father set are absolute. This isn't a divorce proceeding where assets are divided. This is the execution of a pre-existing private legal agreement. She was a beneficiary of a trust, and she violated its terms. The benefit is now terminated. He named his fee a $5,000 retainer to handle the filing, the service, and any potential legal challenges, which he deemed unlikely to succeed. Darnell didn't hesitate. He had more than that in his personal savings account, the one Kiara didn't know about. It was the emergency repairs fund he'd been building for years. This, he thought, was the biggest emergency of all. He wrote the check. "Darnell," Mr. Harris said, folding the check and placing it aside. "This will be unpleasant. She will be shocked. She will be angry. She will likely say terrible things. Are you prepared for that?" Darnell thought of the last 5 years, the small humiliations, the condescension, the feeling of being a stepping stone. "I'm prepared," he said, his voice harder than he'd ever heard it. "She made her choice. Now I'm making mine." The strike was not a single, explosive event. It was a series of quiet, deliberate actions executed with the precision of a military operation. At 9:15 a.m. the next day, a Thursday, Darnell was standing on a loading dock overseeing the unloading of a truck full of home appliances when his phone vibrated. It was an email from Mr. Harris. The subject line was simple: "Filing complete." Attached was a PDF file with the official stamp of the street. Louis County Recorder of Deeds, dated that day, time-stamped at 9:12 a.m. He opened the document. There it was. The Declaration of Termination. His name was listed as the sole grantee. The house on Oakmont Drive was his. A wave of something he couldn't quite name. Not joy, not yet, but a profound and grounding sense of rightness settled over him. He took a deep breath of the cool morning air and went back to work. The second part of the plan was scheduled for 6:30 p.m. that evening. Mr. Harris had arranged for a professional process server, a neutral third party, to deliver the package to their home. Darnell had made sure to be away. He told Kiara he was working late, a necessary lie. In reality, he was sitting in his Camry in a public park 3 miles away, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was streaked with orange and purple. It felt like the end of an era. At 6:38 p.m., his phone buzzed. It was a text from the process server, package delivered and signed for by Kiara Jackson at 6:32 p.m. Darnell closed his eyes. It was done. Inside the house at 4518 Oakmont Drive, Kiara had just accepted the large manila envelope from the stern-faced man at the door. She signed for it with a frown, assuming it was more paperwork for her online courses. She dropped it on the glass and chrome dining table and went back to the kitchen to check on the pasta she was boiling. She was annoyed Darnell was late again. She was planning to talk to him tonight about the upcoming ski trip her friends were planning for January. It was expensive, $2,500 per person, and she needed him to agree to pull the money from his savings. After eating a solitary dinner in front of the television, she remembered the envelope. With a sigh, she picked it up and tore it open, still sitting on the $1,200 leather sofa. The first page was a cover letter on heavy cream-colored paper, bearing the letterhead of Harris, Harris, and Sons. Her eyes scanned the first few lines. "Dear Ms. Jackson, please be advised that as of 9:12 a.m. on this date, Your conditional life estate and right of residence at the property located at 4518 Oakmont Drive has been legally terminated. She blinked, confused. Conditional life estate? The legal jargon was impenetrable. She tossed the letter aside and looked at the next document. It was the Declaration of Termination, the same one Darnell had seen that morning. She saw the legalese, the references to trusts and clauses, and then she saw the paragraph that made the blood drain from her face. Said termination is triggered by the second of two attested instances of the verbal clause, in which the beneficiary referred to the primary grantee, Darnell Jackson, or his position in the home, as temporary. The first instance occurred on or about August 12th, 3 years prior. The second and final instance occurred at approximately 10:41 p.m. on October 19th of this year. Her breath hitched. October 19th, 2 nights ago. The phone call with her mother. Her hands began to shake. She frantically shuffled through the rest of the papers. There was a copy of a document she had never seen before, signed by Darnell and his father 5 years ago. There was a copy of the new, official deed to the house, bearing only one name, Darnell Jackson. And at the very bottom, there was another letter from Mr. Harris. This one was brutally simple. This letter serves as a formal notice to vacate the premises at 4518 Oakmont Drive within 30 days of receipt. As of the date of this notice, you are a tenant at sufferance with no legal right to the property. All personal belongings must be removed by November 21st. 30 days. Vacate. The words swam before her eyes. It was impossible. A joke. A cruel, elaborate prank. She scrambled for her phone, her fingers fumbling as she dialed Darnell's number. It went straight to voicemail. Her first message was confused, angry. Darnell, what is this? I got some crazy letter from a lawyer. Some joke your dead father cooked up? This is insane. Call me right now. She immediately called her mother. Brenda was dismissive at first. It's a scare tactic, sweetie. He can't do that. You're on the deed. Just ignore it. But Kiara's panic was rising. She called Darnell again and again. Each call went to voicemail, his calm, recorded voice a maddening counterpoint to her rising hysteria. The voicemails began to chart her emotional collapse in real time. Voicemail number 2, 7 minutes later. Darnell, I'm serious. Call me. What the hell is going on? My mother's lawyer is looking into it, and you are going to be in so much trouble for this. You can't just kick me out of my own house. Voicemail number 3, 15 minutes later, her voice trembling. Okay, I read the papers again. The trust? Your father's trust? You never told me about this. This is some kind of trick. It's not legal. It can't be legal. Please, just call me. We can talk about this. Voicemail number 4, 30 minutes later, a note of pleading. Darnell, please. Okay? Please. Whatever I said the other night, I was just talking to my mother. You know how she is. It didn't mean anything. You can't do this over something I said. It was just words. Voicemail number 5, an hour later, her voice cracking. This is our home, our life. You can't just throw it all away. 5 years, Darnell. You're just going to throw away 5 years? I love you. Please, baby, just come home. We can fix this. I'll do anything. Voicemail number 6, 2 hours later, sobbing. You can't do this to me. Where am I supposed to go? I have nowhere to go. You can't just make me homeless. It's cruel. It's evil. After everything I did for you, you can't do this. Sitting in his car in the dark park, Darnell listened to each message one by one. His face was a stoic mask. He felt no pity. He felt no anger. He felt nothing at all. He was just a man listening to the consequences of a choice she had made long ago and confirmed 2 nights before. The temporary man was finally permanent, and her time in his house was, at last, over. The consequences of Kiara's words cascaded through her life with brutal, mathematical certainty. The legal papers were not a negotiating tactic, they were a statement of fact. Her world, built on a foundation of Darnell's stability and her own lofty aspirations, crumbled in less than a week. Her first move was denial. On the advice of her mother, she contacted a lawyer, a high-priced attorney from a Clayton firm whose polished website promised aggressive representation. The consultation fee alone was $750, which she had to borrow from Brenda. The lawyer reviewed the documents and delivered the bad news in a brisk, unsentimental phone call. "The trust and the reversionary clause are airtight, Ms. Jackson," the lawyer stated. "It's an unusual setup, but it's legally sound. The property was never truly a marital asset in the traditional sense. You were a conditional beneficiary, and the condition was violated. You have no claim. My advice is to comply with the notice to vacate. Fighting this would be a waste of money, frankly." The total cost of this piece of advice was $750. The second consequence was social. The story she had so carefully crafted for her friends, of a power couple on the rise, temporarily in a starter home, before their inevitable move to Clayton, imploded. She tried to spin it, telling her friend Marissa that they were selling the house as part of an amicable separation. "Oh, that's too bad," Marissa said, her voice laced with a pity that was worse than scorn. "So where are you moving?" I'm moving in with my mother for a little while, just to sort things out," Kiara mumbled. The shame was a physical heat on her cheeks. Moving back in with her mother at 38 was not part of the plan. The third and most devastating consequence was financial. The reality of her $31,000 a year salary, a sum she had always considered temporary pocket money, crashed down on her. Without Darnell's $57,000 income subsidizing her life, her budget was a disaster. Her $380 monthly lease payment on the Nissan Altima, once an afterthought, now represented nearly a quarter of her take-home pay. Her credit card debt, which totaled over $8,000 across 3 cards, filled with charges for restaurants, clothes, and vacations she couldn't afford, now accrued interest at a terrifying rate. She looked for an apartment, but the numbers were grim. A decent one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood started at $1,200 a month, requiring a security deposit and first month's rent she simply did not have. Her dream of a Clayton high-rise was a bitter joke. She had no savings. For 5 years, she had lived a lifestyle supported by an $88,000 household income, while contributing only debt and disdain. The notice to vacate gave her 30 days. Darnell, on Mr. Harris's advice, did not return to the house. He stayed with his friend, Leon, sleeping on a couch, giving her space to pack. He communicated only through text, his messages brief and impersonal. "The water bill is paid. Let me know when you will be out." Her pleas grew more desperate. She sent him long, rambling texts, alternating between declarations of love, furious accusations, and tearful apologies. He read them and then deleted them. It was all just noise. The final, humiliating consequence was the move itself. She couldn't afford movers, so she had to rely on her mother and one resentful cousin. The process took a full weekend. Packing up the life she had taken for granted was a brutal education. The $800 glass dining table wouldn't fit in her mother's small apartment. She had to sell it on Facebook Marketplace for $150. The $1,200 leather sofa also had to go, fetching only $300. Piece by piece, the expensive stage set of her life was dismantled for pennies on the dollar. Her new home was the second bedroom in Brenda's $3,200 a month Clayton apartment. What had seemed like the pinnacle of luxury when she was a visitor now felt like a gilded cage. The room was small, barely fitting a bed, and the few boxes of clothes she'd brought. There was no space for her things, no privacy. She was a guest in her mother's home, and Brenda never let her forget it. "You see, Kiara," Brenda said on her first night there, as they ate a silent dinner, "this is what happens when you hitch your wagon to a man with no ambition. You should have left him years ago." Kiara looked at her mother, the architect of so much of her discontent, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of the same cold rage Darnell must have felt. But it was too little, too late. She had made her choices. She had dismissed the steady, reliable man who had given her a home. She had called him temporary, and in the end, it was her place in his life that had proven to be exactly that. The house on Oakmont Drive was quiet now, waiting for its rightful owner to return. 1 year later, the house on Oakmont Drive was no longer quiet. It was filled with the low hum of a contented life. Darnell had moved back in the day after Kiara had moved out, and the first thing he did was open all the windows, letting a fresh autumn breeze sweep through the rooms, clearing out the last remnants of her cloying lavender scent and the ghost of her dissatisfaction. He had kept his promise to himself and his father. He had kept the house. But he hadn't wanted it to be an empty monument to a failed marriage. On the advice of Mr. Harris, who had become a trusted mentor, he decided to generate passive income. He placed an ad to rent out the 2 spare bedrooms. He was careful in his selection, looking for the same qualities his father had valued: stability, respect, and quiet decency. The first tenant was a young graduate student named Michael, who was studying urban planning at Washington University. He was quiet, studious, and paid his $600 rent on the first of every month without fail. The second was a woman in her 50s named Sarah, a nurse at a nearby hospital who needed a peaceful place to rest between her long shifts. She also paid $600 a month. The combined $1,200 in monthly rental income was a significant boost to his finances. He put it all into a high-yield savings account, the same one he had once used to pay for Kiara's whims. Now, it was building his future. The house felt more like his own than it ever had. He sold the fragile glass dining table and the uncomfortable leather sofa, replacing them with a sturdy, handcrafted wooden table from a local artisan, and his father's old, comfortable recliner. The sleek, impersonal gray walls of the living room were now painted a warm, welcoming cream. His greatest joy was the garden. He had expanded it, tilling the soil and adding 2 new raised beds. On Saturday mornings, you could find him there, his hands in the rich earth, tending to his tomatoes, peppers, and zucchini. The garden was thriving, a testament to his care. It was a tangible representation of his new life, patient, deliberate, and fruitful. The sun was setting one warm evening in early autumn, as Darnell sat on his back porch, sipping a cold beer and looking out over his small kingdom. The bitterness he had felt was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. He had not sought revenge, he had sought accountability. He had enforced a boundary set by a wise and loving father, and in doing so, he had reclaimed his own life. His phone buzzed. It was a text from a number he didn't recognize, but he knew who it was. It had been 6 months since the last one. Darnell. "I know it's been a long time. I'm doing okay. I have my own place now, a small studio. I'm paying my own bills. It's hard. I just wanted to say, you were right, I was wrong. I'm sorry." He read the message, and for the first time he felt a flicker of something like pity. He typed back a short reply. "I'm glad you're okay, Kiara. I wish you peace." He sent the message and then blocked the number. Forgiveness, he had learned, was for his own peace, not for her comfort. He had forgiven her, but that did not require him to let her back into his life. The door was closed. He thought about the nature of wealth. Kiara and her mother had believed it was in expensive cars, designer clothes, and zip codes. They chased an image, a glittering facade. But they had been wrong. True wealth wasn't in what you owned, but in what you couldn't lose, in a fire. It was in the security of a paid-off home, the satisfaction of honest work, the peace of a quiet evening, and the love of a father who had looked out for him even from beyond the grave. It was the solid ground beneath his feet. He was not a temporary man. He was a man with roots, and he was finally home. We all face moments where we are underestimated. The world tells us we are temporary, that we are a means to an end. But true strength isn't about shouting your worth. It's about quietly building a life so solid that it speaks for itself. It's about tending your own garden, knowing that what you nurture with patience and integrity will eventually flourish. True wealth is peace of mind. It's the foundation you build for yourself, brick by brick, choice by choice. Never let anyone tell you that you are temporary in the home you have built. Thank you for joining us on Love Beyond Pride. If Darnell's story of quiet strength resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue to share stories of resilience, justice, and the enduring power of self-respect.